I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they suffer from, it's good to not be delusional when you have an idea. Like, you can't think to yourself, my business is the best business, or I'm the best comedian, or I'm the best athlete. You have to self-correct when you're delusional, but you also can't have too many doubts either, or else you'll be too pessimistic about your ability to succeed.
Sure. No, I said it to you before, and I think we all know that there are different environments that we can be in that are better for us than others. I think you should be honest with yourself. You cannot be really successful unless you look in the mirror and you're honest with yourself, saying, am I doing everything I possibly can? And we all could be better. What's the biggest room in the world? The room for improvement. We can get better, and we should strive to be a better version of what we were yesterday than the day before. And so the more you care, the more you're willing to do. So I think the same way.
I think though that it's related to, and sorry to interrupt.
No.
You're a quoter and I'm an interrupter. So another special episode of the James Altucher. Once again, I've got all-time favorite Steve Cohen.
Thank you very much,
in the house.
James.
Podcast producer extraordinaire, and also back by popular demand since your last. Someone counted. We did a 60-minute podcast, and you had 48 quotable quotes that you said on that podcast. An example quote might be, "The way you do anything is the way you do everything."
Yeah.
There's one that's like a tongue twister that you always say that I just heard you say. It's if you don't do the best with what you got, you got to get what you could do best. I don't even know what it is. What's the quote?
If you don't have time to do it right the first time.
No.
Oh, that one?
The best.
Things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out.
Wait. Things work out best for those who make the best how things work out.
No. Things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out.
Yeah, that's roughly what I said.
Is that? No, you mangled it. I was right. You're wrong.
All right.
Steve 1, Chessmaster 0. Thank you.
Good enough. So we're gonna do a podcast. We've done 500 or so interviews on this podcast, and we've interviewed so many successful peak performers. We thought it would be good to see why sometimes people don't achieve the success they would like. I mean, not everybody wants to be successful. There's lots of goals in life. Success in one area is not necessarily the be-all and the end-all. Being a peak performer in whatever area you love is not necessarily the best way for happiness or life satisfaction. But we've seen a lot of people who do want to
Yeah.
achieve amazing goals and they fail at it. They don't succeed at it. And I think, and we see it not just on this podcast, but in all aspects.
And I think that was the derivation of this idea to do this podcast, because you and I talk all the time, and me sometimes more than you, but and we see a lot of people in our orbit, and we'll be frustrated with them, or we'll see guests.
Yeah,
who
and
come
we
on.
could see the obvious
Yeah.
things. Like we ask ourselves, why isn't this person like number one
Yeah.
in the world or number one
Yeah.
in the city or whatever?
Yeah.
And we can see little personality things. Sometimes it's internal; it's how they treat themselves, and sometimes it's external. How do they treat other people or their activity or whatever? So
Absolutely. And I think, absolutely. And I think like it's instructive for us, and we thought it would help other people. I mean, that's why we do this. We want people to listen and get value. It's not a vanity project. We want people to listen and say, okay, you know what? I can learn from that. And I learned from that too. Like, we might as well just dive right in and then get to other people.
Yeah.
But I think there have been a lot of situations where we deal with people and you are a comedian and you've been doing it for 4 years and, super, super funny at it and you're getting great at it. But like when I watched you start, I've watched you, so in the 2 years I've worked with you, interact with these comedians and try and become a part of their tribe and try and excel at it and try and earn both status and affiliation with them. And there are times where I'll look at it from an external view and I'll be like, hey, you know what? They're okay, but there's a reason they're not more successful, even though they won't see that way.
and it's not just with comedians; it's with entrepreneurs. It's with
Everything.
sports. It's with
writers. It's with producers.
like obviously, we've had a lot of athletes. We had
Yeah.
on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the best basketball player
Yeah.
in history. We've had on Tony Hawk, the best skateboarder in history. We've had on Sasha Cohen,
Yeah.
ice skating. Keith Hernandez from the Mets.
Yeah.
What separates like if someone's on a basketball team, they've already gone through so many
Right.
hurdles to get on a professional basketball team. There's a million people who would love to play on a professional basketball team, and a couple hundred make it. And then maybe 5 are considered
Yeah.
like legends who, let's say, at any
Yeah.
given moment in the NBA. What separates like someone like a Kobe Bryant from someone who's probably
Sure.
just as good, but they could probably get there, but they don't? Like who could have gotten to where Kobe Bryant was? But
Yeah.
he was like, I don't even know if he's retired or not. That's how.
Yeah, he's
illiterate-
retired, and he does an awful lot about, in that particular case, about having the Mamba mentality.
What's that?
A Mamba mentality, I think, is just kind of, I mean, that's a word I think it's kind of like a snake, like a rattlesnake or something like that. But he had a killer mentality. Like he had a way of looking at things where he was very, killer at it. And
But
I think,
what does that mean, like in practice? Like, were other basketball players who probably had just as much skill or physical talent?
Yeah.
Were they not? Was it a psychological thing? Was it they weren't practicing as much? Like, what
I
was
think they
it?
probably weren't. And I think like we could see it. Like I think it's kind of, you've talked a lot about this, about in the way up, like you talk about micro skills an awful lot. Like, okay, comedy is, likability or interacting with a crowd or crowd work or, just punchlines or writing or timing, and I think with that, yes, you're at a certain level and the details separate the good from the great. It's not what you do, it's what you don't do.
Oh my God, are you dropping quotes on us? Do I have to write this down? What was that first one? I just want to
The
write it down.
details separate the good from the great. And I think if you look at it, I wouldn't, so we've had Bill Cartwright on the podcast, and
So he just to mention, he was the center of the Chicago Bulls when Michael Jordan played with them. He won a
Yeah.
bunch of championship rings or whatever they are.
yeah, he won 5. He won 3 as a player and 2 as a coach. And he's been around a lot of great players. And having been around him, I watch him evaluate different people. And I remember when we started, and then we'll get to like sports or different people. But like I think that I remember you were seeking approval because you wanted to join the fraternity of comedians. And I think that you were speaking to a bunch of comedians who had, a degree of success. They were talented and, And they were all talking, in my opinion, about their success, and they were kind of satisfied with it. And they said that they, you asked them about like, what's the difference between you and Amy Schumer and Chris Rock, and they were like, just money. We're just as good. And I felt like if I were around people who were of a comparable amount of success professionally, they in music, they wouldn't be saying they're better than Adele. They wouldn't be saying they're better than Taylor Swift or Beyonce. They would say they love music and they love to do it. And I felt like that in their opinion, they were complacent and they were happy where they were. And
or do you think?
And so,
do you think they're complacent for artificial reasons? And again, I don't want to keep it to just comic because I find this in every area.
No, for sure.
But are they complacent because they're like, there's two ways to be complacent. Let's call positive and negative. Are they complacent because, I'm happy with where I'm at. I've got other things to do going on in my life. Because I know some people like that, and that's fine.
Sure.
But then there's kind of this negative complacency, which is they think there's a delusional complacency, which is they think they're already should be good. It's just that their amazing skills and talent haven't been properly recognized. They've been shafted by the system.
Okay. Now, I would say the football coach, Bill Parcells, a name that's most likely not going to ring any bells with you, but he won all these championships, and he would constantly reinforce to his team that you are what your record is. If your record is 2-5, that's what you are. So if you're not doing something, that's who you are. But I would say we all know people in our industry. My dad was a physician. You were in computer programming. In any position, we see, again, the details separate the good from the great. Now, when I was in TV, I remember seeing, I can watch TV and I can look at people on TV, and I guess only if you really know, you can see their habits and see the distinction. And, obviously Malcolm Gladwell's talked about it, but I was talking about it with a former colleague about a reporter, and I felt like, wow, she's, very physically appealing, and she's, good, but I don't know why she's not further along. And sometimes it takes like a desire, like a real burning desire to get there, that successful people do stuff unsuccessful people don't do. And this producer said, well, Steve, when she does a piece, she just does the same rap and intro every single time. She doesn't vary it. She's not enterprising stories. She's repeating, not reporting. And we see that in every single industry. And it's that extra
so in
bit.
in that case, she's not maybe reviewing the video that she was just in and analyzing it with a coach to kind of say, hey, you did the same thing, 2 times in a row, 3 times in a row, maybe vary it up a little bit, maybe move around a little more, maybe I don't know what else.
There's a lot she could have done in that particular case, and I have a friend who's in that industry, and he said, I know it sounds sexist, but it's wrong, but it's a cosmetic industry. I mean, in any industry, I know men who are anchors and they're incredibly fit. And, people used to say that about the golfer Phil Mickelson with Tiger Woods. They said if he really wanted to be, the best in the world, or is missing that one thing, maybe he would have lost 10 or 20 pounds and been a little bit more fit, And so, yes.
And I think it's not, okay, part of it, in that particular case, it's not fitness, so one could look better on camera, but, playing 18 or some of these tournaments are 64 holes of golf or whatever, it takes a lot of energy. So if you're going to get tired faster and you're playing an athletic sport at the highest possible level against Tiger Woods, who's amazingly fit, he's going to have much more energy to finish strong.
Yeah, I would say a few things. One, it's kind of like Stephen Covey says, if you have a burning desire for something, to do something, it's going to be easier for you to say no, right? A lot of, but getting back to that situation, if you really want it bad enough, you'll figure out a way to do it, and if you love something and you have passion for it and you have a modicum of skill, I think about in what we do, we've had some success here, but what we always try and tell ourselves, not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. You're in love, or if I'm in love, it's something you don't just, you put your heart into it and you really think, wow, how could I have done better? If you buy somebody you love a gift, you're not like, well, I just got them that. I hope they love it. I hope they really do it. So when we do something, it's, again, I'll sit back and say, you know what, I could have done this differently, even though nobody else would notice. I remember when I was at the early show, Beyonce like she was taping something and she had the flu and she just kept working at it. And I remember like there was a perfectly good version of one of the songs and she was like, no, I'm doing it again. And it's that drive. And Kobe Bryant has that drive. He wants to win more than other people. And you judge their priorities by somebody's actions. Like, do they go in a team where they can win or do they just want to make money? And so that's with any situation. And
So do you think that there's basketball players out there that they look at Kobe Bryant and they're like, oh, I could be as good as him.
Yes,
He just
100%.
got lucky with the PR machine.
100%, 100%.
But don't they think to themselves, oh, if I just wake up at 5 in the morning every day and do practice an extra hour, I could do it.
And we've talked about that a lot. I'm sure some people think like that, but you either I think you have to have that fire in you and drive. And I remember there was like in the Olympics one year there was something with Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte, and Ryan Lochte was like eating poorly and he kind of reformed his situation. And Michael Phelps had just come back, and maybe Michael Phelps is more talented, like in certain situations. Again, maybe in this, but I guess Ryan Lochte can be a better version of himself and still never be as effective as Michael Phelps, but he could certainly be better than you were. So I think that's the situation. So like these comedians, they could be better. We all could be better. What's the biggest room in the world? The room for improvement. Like we can get better, and we should strive to be a better version of what we were yesterday than the day before. So somebody like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Magic Johnson, they're perfectionists, and they really, desire to be the best and have that desire, that burning desire. And there's a difference between certain people. You see that in business, and that's what I'm so intrigued by your book, Think Like a Billionaire. A lot of people would be happy just having 10 million or 100 million. And what is it about these people, whether it's avarice, desire, competitiveness, or.
Right, so there's that ambition, but you take a look at a lot of these guys,
Yeah.
like Ken Langone, who started Home Depot. He's contributed so
Right.
much to New York City hospitals, is a big philanthropist, but probably worth 10, 15 billion, whatever it
Sure.
is. He described one story where I think it was 1969, he was losing a deal to Ross Perot.
Yeah.
In the morning, Ross Perot calls him and says, we're gonna do the deal with
Yeah.
Goldman Sachs instead of you. And Ken Langone said, what are you doing for lunch? And Ross was like, Ken, you're in New York
Yeah.
City. And Ken's like, I don't care. Book a place. I'll see you at 1. And he jumped right on a plane and flew to Dallas. So it means to me there's lots of things happening.
Yeah.
It's not just a desire for money. It means Ken Langone has to be physically healthy. I'm not saying he has to be in
Sure.
athletic shape or he has to be good looking. He just has to be healthy enough that he's going to have the energy to
Sure.
think on his feet really fast. And like if you're tired and sick, you can't think, I'm going to meet him for
Yeah.
lunch and get there. Then he's got to get to the airport. He's got to handle the plane ride, drive there. He's got to have the kind of emotional backing around him. Like
Right.
his wife and family have to be fine with it. He's got to bring whatever employee. He's got to have the right employees. So he's got to have the right people around
Yeah.
him. He has to have faith in his ability to convince Ross Perot. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they suffer from, it's good to not be delusional when you have an idea. Like you can't think to yourself, my business is the best business, or I'm the best comedian, or I'm the best
Yeah.
athlete. You have to self-correct when you're delusional, but you also can't have too many doubts either, or else you'll be too pessimistic about your ability to succeed.
Sure. No, I said it to you before, and I think like we all know that there are different environments that we can be in that are better for us than others. Now, I happen to be a sports fan, and Kobe Bryant, his dad was a professional player in Italy. Maybe it helped him to be in Italy, and he didn't have, he was in an international country, a foreign country, and he came over here, but he came to the NBA at a young person, but he was groomed for it. And
So he probably didn't have as many doubts as someone who
Yeah.
rose up, got on a team, and is just,
Sure.
grateful to be on that team and doesn't work harder somehow because they think maybe they can't get better, or
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know, like, he studied Michael Jordan. He was very driven, and he came from an area where he felt a certain degree of, like, sure, I'm entitled and I deserve this. But then he had that extra competitiveness. And I don't know. Like, I don't know how much nature it is and nurture. You probably see it in 6 or 7 year old kids where they're competitive. They need to win. Like they throw a fit if they lose. And sometimes it's but then you're going to say, okay, once you get to the NBA, everybody is like that. And they're not all like that. There are guys who, will go out to clubs at 3 or 4 in the morning, figuring like, I have $100 million in the bank. I can't control it. And it's in every profession. Like, well, I'm not in a good team, and they make excuses. Well,
Or here's another thing I've seen. So I'll go out to dinner with people who are quote unquote entrepreneurs or writers or whatever.
Sure.
And they always tell me, well, here's my idea for a business. Here's my idea for a book.
Yeah.
And then they'll keep talking and drinking and talking and drinking.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, it's like 11 p.m. And for me, I like to get up early so I can start writing or whatever. When I wonder to myself if these people are doing it there's sort of this inertia where you have all these ideas, but you never execute on them. Like inertia just keeps driving you forward, but you can't succeed if you're not actually doing things.
Well, yesterday I was
carving out the time.
Yesterday I had dinner with somebody, and she's a track and field champion, and she was like an Olympic caliber athlete, and she was like, I stopped eating at 6 or 7 in the morning, and it was hard for me. My dad was a champion, track and field person himself. And when I was 13, I was the best in my country. But then he told me, listen, you're good for this level, but if you really want to be good, you're going to have to deny yourself certain things. And it's the old line, like, it's not what you do, it's what you don't do. It's not the athlete who like works out 3 or 4 hours a day. It's a guy who's not eating McDonald's. It's a guy who's not going out drinking with everybody. It's the guy who's getting enough rest. And a lot of those people, they think that they could talk it into existence. And we've talked a lot about how you could act something into existence, and so
like to write, you could have the best ideas for a thriller in the world, but we know, like we just had Brad Thor on the podcast, we know that guy writes, what did he say, like 3,000 words a day, basically.
And I'll say this for people, because even though like there's that aphorism, like no man's a hero to his valet, or familiarity brings contempt. I've been with you for 2 years and you work harder than anybody I've ever seen. And so it's not an accident. So I think people look at people's results and they say they have jealousy or they have envy, but you should stop and think. And like, well, that athlete spent a lot of time in the gym, or he spent a lot of time training, or he spent a lot of time reading every book about it. And so I think you should be honest with yourself. You cannot be really successful unless you look in the mirror and you're honest with yourself, saying, am I doing everything I possibly can? And I feel like a little humbled and presumptuous to talk about other people's stuff, because I know, as we've said, like, don't point the finger, point the thumb. We can look at ourselves, and there are reasons when I'm not more successful. I could be doing things that I'm not doing, or doing stuff you're more uncomfortable with, or doing what's most important first.
Well, and that's a good point, because I sometimes, let's say among my books that I've written, I think sometimes towards the end, like I get very excited to start, and then I write the book. But we've talked about this also, that the details at the end are just as important as how you start. Like it's a different skill set to kind of finish something. But I think I get careless sometimes. I don't do that extra final step often that it takes to be great. Well, it's really hard to do the details at the end.
Well, Jay-Z said, treat your first like your last and your last like your first. I mean, you have to treat it a certain way. In relationships, you should treat people with the same deference you do in the middle of the relationship than you do in the beginning. When in the beginning, you're so deferent to them and you're so concerned about them. And I try and do that. I try and appreciate people and respect it. We all lose sight, though, of different things in our lives. And so I've talked about this to people where I've looked at their podcast or something, and I'm like, hey, they don't have that many downloads. And they'll tell me, well, they'll say, well, they're just doing it for fun, and okay,
right, so
which is fine.
That becomes an excuse then for not paying attention to the details, for having a certain kind of laziness, for, I think again, being careless with your approach is important at every level. Like if we're doing a podcast and I didn't read the book of the person on the podcast, that's careless. The podcast won't be as good. We'll get less subscribers. Then you make less money from it. But
it becomes a slippery slope. Like you don't do it one time, and I think you're afraid of that. Like when we have people on there, once you start slipping and you let it's like a restaurant that, okay, we're not doing this. And you start cutting corners, then, okay, it's easier the next time. Then it becomes easier the next time.
It's like the broken window theory.
Yeah.
So it's that. Well, I don't know if the theory is accurate or not, but I guess so. Giuliani became mayor of New York, and his theory of policing was that if there's one broken window on a street, within a half hour, there's going to be another broken window on the street. Like people will sort of recognize this is a street you could burglarize, but then it starts to spread more and more.
Yeah.
And so his whole thing was no broken windows.
Well, that's an analog of like the details separate the good from the great. I mean,
Right,
those
so
are
that's a
details.
detail. Like it almost seems like a tiny detail, but he arguably says that he changed crime in New York City.
Well, didn't Rockefeller like again? The more you care about it, the more you're concerned about the details, right? Like, I just I care about certain people, and I remember I gave him a James Altucher Show T-shirt, and I was like, oh shoot, I should have got one for your daughter because I care about them. I wasn't like, well, hey, at least I did this much. And so the more you care, the more you're willing to do. So if you really care about it, then you're going to want to be the best ever. Like you care about comedy, you cared about chess, you cared about finance, you care about writing, so you make it a priority. And so your actions, are consistent with your priorities. And I think that if you're not, then I think it reflects in what you do. So I think like the same way.
I think though that it's related to, and sorry to interrupt.
No.
You're a quoter and I'm an interrupter. I think like you just listed 5 things for me.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you included like, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But so I have almost too many things, and that's a problem too, because then I wonder, well, should I focus on this? Should I focus on this? I think vacillating between many things is another way that people prevent themselves from success in any one thing. Because if you do too many things, you can't be the best at, there must be a quote here.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to quote, if you chase 2 rabbits, you wind up catching none.
Right. There you go. That's a great quote.
Thank you. I try.
I'm going to tweet that right now. And before the end of this podcast, I'm going to see how many people have retweeted it. If you chase 2 rabbits, you end up catching none. I'm going to see what people.
Exciting podcasting, live tweeting while we're podcasting. But yeah.
I think that's true. So I think vacillating between different. I remember my very first business, we were making websites for entertainment companies, but at different points we thought, oh, maybe we can make more money as a record label, or maybe we can make more money making. Right. Literally, we thought we could be a tea company, and so we were, until we really started to focus on, okay, we're gonna build great big websites and charge a lot for it. We weren't able to grow as a business. We were still trying to find. And I think you see that, even like for sports, you can't be great at everything. You have to say, what am I going to be? Am I going to be the best pitcher, or am I going to be the best hitter? Am I going to be the best catcher?
Well, that's, and again, I remember one time I happened to watch Bill Cartwright like train some kid, and he was this really good young player, and he was looking at him and he's saying, well, what could he do that nobody else can do? Is he a better shooter than any of us? A better rebounder? And so I think, and Ben Horowitz, who I always respect his stuff, wrote a book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and he talks about hiring people, and he talked about we hire sometimes people who don't have weaknesses, but we don't hire them for like being incredibly strong in a particular area. So you had this conversation with David Epstein about like in the book Range, which I thought was a great book about generalization versus specialization. But again, what is success? I think that comes down to it. And again, some people are happy being a comedian and having, getting $100 or $200 or touring. And it's all, I think for me, I have to define success a certain way. And I've said this to you. And again, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare. It makes you bitter or vain. Like form your own sense of like, what is success? And success to me, like John Wooden would say, is like knowing that you did the best you possibly could to be the best version of yourself. But like you've talked about what you, what you really want to do. And you want to be a good dad. You want to be a good husband. You want to be good to those people around you. You want to have good people around you. I try and avoid people who make me fearful or sad. But I think like, so some people are happy. Like, and I remember reading a very good article in Sports Illustrated, and it was about the basketball player Daryl Dawkins, who faced so many expectations his whole life, and he passed recently, but he was a very fun-loving guy. Like he had all these nicknames, and he claimed he went from Lovetron, and they thought he was going to be like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Moses Malone, or this great player. And he was like such a prodigious physical talent, and he never really reached it. And, I remember there was this writer, Dave Wall, wrote this great piece, and he said, you know what? The guy played 13 years. He scored, thousands of points. Maybe he wasn't the best ever, but he made a lot of people laugh. He had so much fun. He was just a fun guy and to be around. And he had a lot of people who loved him. And we should all be so lucky. We should all be so lucky to have that kind of situation. So I think for us, and we've talked about it, like different hierarchies are comparing. And so, but I do think, I remember also, again, I'm place you weren't likely to be at. I remember one time I was watching a basketball game, and the Knicks, earlier in my career, would go to a lot of sporting events and go to the locker rooms, and the Knicks lost to the Indiana Pacers, and Reggie Miller scored like 8 points, and like it was a famous game where like he totally just took over the game. And I happened to follow him in the locker room, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs. He's saying, "They don't want it. They don't want it. So we'll take it." And he was very hungry. He wanted to win. He had a drive. It doesn't mean you always succeed. But like some people don't want it. So like some of those people who come in and do a podcast and they're just riffing and they're not prepared and they're not trying to provide any value, and it's a vanity project, and they're more concerned about looking cool or sounding cool rather than really making a change, like Seth Godin would say, like making a change for somebody. Like when you watch something good, you hear a song, it makes a change in you. You listen to it and you say, wow, I really like it. You have a certain feeling. It's not just throwing something out there. So, but those people don't make any change. You don't go on a limb. You're not going to grab fruit, and it's not. And so, fine, they're looking for different things than we're looking for. But like the same way,
but maybe
they
not,
know.
though.
But they know that it's. They know that. That they're not. But other people, like you said, they delude themselves. They don't think that they think they're doing everything they can. They think they are.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main, that's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. There was one podcast which we didn't release on purpose.
Yeah.
Where the guy, you'll know who I'm referring to once I describe it.
I'll tell everybody who. Yeah.
Where the guy, I kept trying to bring up things in his book, and it was a good book. I kept trying to bring up things in his book, and he said, no, just tell people to read the book.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to talk about that now. And
I can't say he was the worst person in the world, but that's only because I haven't met everybody else in the world.
And I, he didn't get the idea that this podcast is not, we're not an advertisement. We want to provide value to people. That's what makes this podcast good. That's why people come on this podcast. And he didn't have a sense of you provide value, and then that's how people become attracted to your products and brand or whatever it is you're trying to promote. You can't just promote. It doesn't work. Then you don't. I think what you're kind of saying is you get better by providing more and more value without asking for things in return. And that, because you might not know, like if someone goes to practice an hour early, they don't know if that's going to make them better, but it just becomes they're providing value for themselves, hopefully, which will provide value for their team or the audience or whatever. And they have to go in there with the mission of providing value rather than, how am I just promoting myself?
Yes.
Rather than building the skill.
Yes, I think again, like for us, I really do focus on my actions, on my outcomes. I'm not saying I'm people a lot more successful, and I just try and be. It sounds corny, or I just try and be the best I can, and just get better and better and be better than I was yesterday, as do you. But I do think some people delude themselves, and you look at them and you're like, you know what? You should have followed up with us afterwards. You should have been appreciative that James read the book and flattered rather than had to boost your ego. Again, we saw this when we had a prominent guest come and she came by herself and that person said, our publicists really love you and James and they want to meet you. And then I was like, why didn't they come here? And somebody whose name rhymes with Mames said, well, they're busy. And then somebody whose name rhymes with Steve. I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt. Somebody whose name rhymes with Steve said, well, if she were Jennifer Lopez, there'd be 10 of them here. And they're not doing their job. Like successful people do what unsuccessful people don't do. So they should make her feel important. And there's a lot that could be gained from doing it. If they did that, they would have met us. They could have pitched 10 other clients. They could have worked with that person and said, you know what, you're right. You should do this, this, and this. What do you want to do? They can make that person feel better. Everything we do is based on how we feel. Why is somebody going to come on our show? Why is somebody wear Gucci versus pay less? Because they feel a certain way from doing it. Like I can go why do you buy this shaving cream or whatever? You feel a certain way from doing it. And so I want people to feel a certain way when they listen to us or listen to you. And that, again, brings us full circle. When I started with you, when I was in TV, certain people wanted to be famous, in my opinion. You said, hey, I enjoy when people come up to me and they say, hey, it changed my life. And I really appreciate it. It makes me feel good about that. So you could judge people on, what they settle for, right? Like, it's like, I liked Megyn Kelly's, book. I like just certainly the quote where she said the best advice she got was somebody said to her, the only difference between you and the person whose life you admire is that you settled for less and they settled for more. And so some of these people are happy just doing it.
I don't know if they are, because we see so many people who are bitter that someone is at, we're primates at heart. So every primate species has ranks themselves from the alpha to the omega.
Sure.
And it's hard to break that hierarchy. And humans don't have that as much because there's so many hierarchies. But like in a job, for instance, you start off as, an analyst, then a senior analyst, then a project manager, then a director, then a VP, then a senior VP, then executive VP. So there's like a hierarchy that is in every organization, institution, and even like sports. You're in a hierarchy.
Sure.
Like, here's how you scored. Here's how everybody scored this year. In comedy, here's how many years you've been doing, or here's what TV credits you have. In movies, here's how much money or in entrepreneurship, here's how much money you made. Here's a question I have, though. So two things. One is, I think, again, what holds some people back is they get a little delusional. I think bitterness is kind of an ancillary outcome from being delusional. You think, I should already be...
Sure.
Some of the hierarchy is arbitrary. So you kind of have to kind of work on those details to make it not arbitrary. But I think some people think that they should be at the alpha when they're somewhere in the middle because they haven't taken care of all the details. But they see aspects of themselves that they say, well, I'm better than so-and-so. I should be here. And then that stops them because they stop working on the details.
Listen, I'm the first person to say, like, I was the same person. I mean, I've been in environments where I'm really thriving and I'm the same person. And you want to be at a place worthy of your talents. And I think one thing you're great about is you empower the people around you. So I feel fortunate, and so like I always say, like, I try and bloom where I'm planted. I tried to make the most of those earlier opportunities and wherever you are. And I have friends who aren't so fortunate. And I have friends, Stephen Covey likes to say, like, you should, he's dead, but rest in peace. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People creator.
I didn't know he was dead.
I'm pretty sure. Well, if you're,
I'm gonna go on the World Wide Web.
Fine.
Triple W.
Okay, while you're doing that, but he likes to say, like, people should consider, like, their decisions, not their circumstances. Where you are is because you're in. And I like to say, like, hey, make the best of whatever situation you're in. But like certain times you're not in a great situation. It's very crowded. It's hard. So getting back to your NBA analogy, I'm sure some people look at it and they're like, you know what, that coach, is not playing me, and he likes this person, that person's his nephew, or you see it in comedy, the booker's not putting it in me, you see it in, any situation. And yes, there's some arbitrary situations.
But I think just like with investing, you take away the risk of the arbitrary by diversifying.
And isn't that what you're doing when you say, oh, what if I, like you, like maybe if you just keep doing comedy, you'll be Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and Jerry Seinfeld all rolled into one. But maybe, but we've talked about the Scott Adams skill stack. Maybe it's your whole situation has made you,
Well, it's a balance. You can't. You just have to be. All of this is really about awareness. So are you being delusional about where you are, and that's leading to bitterness, or are you vacillating too much on what you should be doing, or are you too careless about the details at the end, but you think it doesn't matter? Like, for instance, take a look at Tim Ferriss's podcast. Okay, he sends out an email where he breaks down by minute, like all the show notes.
Right.
He has advertisers on that page. He does like one or two little extra things.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're good or bad or we should do them, but maybe those are details We should do. I'm not saying we should.
No,
but I see different podcasters do different things, and but we're busy doing lots of things. So sometimes maybe I don't take it over the finish line on the details.
and myself included. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a way of looking at things. Like you could, getting back.
Which is different than being delusional. Like you have to be aware when you're not taking care of details. You have to be aware, like just now when you brought up, like I'm doing all these things. I'm aware that I'm vacillating and trying to decide which things to focus on more, and that is a problem for me. I'm aware when, or try to be aware when I'm too lazy or when I have too much doubts on myself, so it's getting in the way of trying to improve something.
Getting back to, I'll say two things. Like with Tim Ferriss, like where he talked in the 4-hour work week, essentially the way I interpret a lot of it is that the 40-hour work week, we spend a lot of time doing quote unquote busy work to avoid doing what maybe you could do sooner. So I do that too. I remember you used to watch The Honeymooners, and he would always play Swanee River before he did something, and that's like we do that too. We don't put what's most important first sometimes, and we need to, and so we could be self-critical and say that. And I know for me, like of course there's a lot of things that I'm not doing that perhaps I could. And you have to become ruthless with your time to a certain degree, cut out certain things, and I think as we get, hopefully, we can get better, but it's a decision we have to make. Getting back to Carol Dweck, and we always have a choice between fixed decisions and growth decisions. Like we have a decision every day, right? Like we could be with like somebody who we're comfortable with or try something new. Or every day, any decision you could, right? Can't you?
Yeah, but like think about the example with people going out to dinner and talking about their ideas instead of doing them. So let's say you just do that. Let's say all you did was go out to that dinner once a week. And you could say, sure, I want to be with these friends once a week.
Yeah.
That's fine. But then you have to be aware it's probably taking 6 hours roughly.
Yeah.
Maybe even more. But let's just say 6 hours from the time you leave your house to the time you
Sure.
get back and recover. So 6 hours once a week, that's 310 hours a year. So in 310 hours, let's say let's say you're a writer and you could write 100 words an hour, which is a very small amount. It's one paragraph. So let's say you can write one paragraph an hour. If you do that for 300 hours, that's you just missed out on writing a book. So,
right. But your happiness in life is based on your relationships with people. But
that's where you have to decide. Like, do you let the inertia of spending these extra hours? Like maybe you could see your friends in other ways, or maybe it's not every week; it's every 3 weeks. Or are you vacillating between this is what you really want to do as opposed to writing a book? Or if you have doubts in yourself, and the way you kind of are overcoming these doubts is by not doing it at all, but just talking about it. I think this is where a degree of being aware of these things and having a degree of self-awareness about it. But then, and also the delusions too, like, oh, this guy's not a good writer. I can write better than him. But then you have to say, if you don't write, if you're just talking about it, again, delusions lead to bitterness.
But those are the people I don't want to be around. Like I think whenever you have an aggregation of people, you see it with comedians sitting there, or I saw it in TV producers, and there's a jealousy, and if you feed it, it will grow. And I don't want to be around. Not only do I not want to be around people who make you fearful or sad, I don't want to be around people who, are judging other people, or I just think.
Or you can also be delusional about your own abilities. So if someone is obsessed with being a professional basketball player, but they're, me, it's just not going to, but no, I could do it. I know I can do it.
But you could be better than you were. Like, you know what I mean?
Right,
And that's why we always try and tell ourselves, like, just focus on our actions, not our outcomes. Like, let's just do our best and really do our best and focus our attention on that. But like, when I was in TV, I would be around people and they would look at this person. Oh, she slept right at the top. She looks like a man, or this person's a moron, and again, small people talk about other people, big people talk about ideas. Nobody else's success comes at your expense. We all do it, and I do it, and I think we have to force yourselves to it's a muscle, and to say, you know what, that's energy that's not constructive. And we have to, we have to push ourselves to be a better version of ourselves. And
so here's another question though. At some point, when should you quit? So like all these people who are like in the middle of the chain between alpha and omega, maybe they're even professional level, but they're just not going to be the best in the world, but they're
Yeah.
bitter, they're unhappy, and maybe they're even
Yeah.
getting worse because they're spending energy complaining instead of getting better. When should someone
Okay.
quit?
I
And I'll just tell you from my examples,
Yeah.
like I have many examples of when I've quit things, but sometimes I quit when things are plateauing, and I always like to feel like I'm improving,
Yeah.
so it feels unpleasant to just plateau. So when I was doing the podcast question of the day with Stephen Dubner, it was a fine podcast. We were getting great downloads. We were making money, but we kind of felt just the quality of the podcast and the number of downloads were plateauing. So we quit. And sometimes you fall backwards. And so if you're just, if you're just getting worse at something and you can't
Sure.
figure out how to get better and you're trying everything and you're aware of all these issues, sometimes then you should quit. Like if you're let's say you were selling black and white TVs, and you refuse to get into the color TV business, and you see all these color TV businesses selling better than you, and you're slipping, and you're not selling any TVs. At some point, you have to say,
Yes.
okay, I'm not doing the
Yes.
right thing.
Yes, and it's
You have to be willing to quit your dream.
well, I
Maybe
liked-
someone's dream is to sell
Well, I
all the
liked-
black and white TVs.
Well, I liked what Charlemagne said, where he talked about how everybody's like follow your dreams, and he had a chapter saying like screw your dreams, like okay, like you want to be a rapper, but you're terrible. You can't rhyme, you can't write, you have no flow. Like Jay wouldn't be a good rapper, but I think that not to pick on Jay, yes, to pick on Jay, but like Jay shouldn't be a rapper. I mean, but so Jay should do something else. Jay should be an engineer. He's a great engineer, great at a lot of things. But no, I think that's healthy too, right? Like I think like you could, if you're holding on to something so tightly, you don't realize everything else you can, grab and do. But yeah, I mean, I also think it's how you frame it. I quit this so I could do something better. But I again, like it's not for everybody. You know what I mean? Not everybody wants to,
right.
like that. But I when I was in again, and I myself was definitely a practitioner of this, and I wasn't my best self, and I could see that, and it's like that line, like if you live in a ditch long enough, you'll start to decorate it. Like you'll start feeling this certain way, and you'll start feeling a sense of helplessness. You'll feel like, well, I worked so hard at this, and it didn't make a difference, and or these
Right,
people
so then
don't
you
recognize
get-
it, or they're, and I have friends who are in that environment, and I'll try and I guess sort of like the plus equal minus at Frank Shamrock and Ryan Holiday, and you talk about where you learn from people who are better than you in certain things, and you try and help other people, and they'll look at, well, Steve, they're never gonna promote me, and I'm like, you're right, you're damn skippy, they're not going to. Like try and look at yourself the way they look at you over there. But you have a lot of choices. I'm sitting across from the person who wrote Choose Yourself. We have a multitude of choices how we can react to that. And you would have 500 ideas about what that person can do if you feel trapped, and figure out a different way to kind of with that situation. I'm not saying it's easy. It's simple, but it's not easy.
And
But-
I think part of choice too is like you just described someone who wanted to get promoted, didn't get promoted because they were placing a lot of value on
external validation.
on a hierarchy.
Oh,
So
yeah.
promoting means you're moving up in a hierarchy. And so a lot of times you have to be, again, let's say you're a musician, you might not be able to be more successful than the Beatles, but you could be the most, or
Yeah.
they have a very unique sound, or Pink Floyd has a very unique sound. The Beach Boys, we just interviewed Mike Love. They have a very unique sound. There's no other band that sounds like them. You could be the best unique sound for your voice. As you say, go to the place least crowded, and that's where you find success, where there's no hierarchy, so you could kind of be the top of the hierarchy.
But I want to be helpful to people, and I want to just like convey a sense of like, this is how we talk. Like, and I think the same way, like you eschew the idea, I can't believe I just used the word
Eschew.
but like,
ESCHEW.
No, but I think you avoid saying, oh, it's not self-help. I'm just telling you my story about, in your case, how you managed to lose millions of dollars is twice.
4 times.
Okay, fine. Yeah, sorry to underestimate you. No, but but
Underestimate my
that
stupidity.
specific example, and I've heard people talk about they don't need a how-to business book. They want to do read a biography about somebody and say this is how that person handled it. And I mentioned that example of like a publicist who wouldn't even come with that client over there, and it's wrong on like 10 different levels. And and it's wrong. It doesn't make that person feel important. They're not going the extra mile. They can go back to the office another time and do it. They're not trying to help their other clients. They just think small. And those people are prisoners of the moment. They're not prisoners of a bigger dream. They're not trying to do something different, And I think I've watched you, and you've been pretty generous to people around here. And it doesn't mean you have to be obsequious to you. It doesn't mean that you have to be a certain way. But we've had people on our podcast, and you see them, hey, long time no see, and they're like, when are you going to have me back on the podcast? And I want to say, and most of the time I do, I'd say, moron, why don't you invite him on your podcast, which in comparison to ours is 2 styrofoam cups and a piece. Well, I don't want to compare. But in a comparison to ours, it's not as popular. But what's the worst thing James is going to say? No, screw you. Only come on mine. It's give something. Try and be valuable. Happiness begins where selfishness ends. Don't always just think about yourself and be transactional. And I'm like, that's why you're not more successful. I'll be honest with you, that you're selfish, you're short-sighted, that you're not thinking about a win-win, and you're not thinking big enough. You're not thinking about, okay, let's make the pie bigger. You're thinking that it's a zero-sum game, and it's not. And I see a lot of people like that, and I see them with us. And it's like, if I'm want to meet with somebody, I will sit there and say, hey, I hope this can work out for both of us. And I really do. I'm not trying to spin somebody like a dreidel. I'm trying to just be like, hey, I think this could work for you guys. And hopefully it works, for both of us. It will help you to come on our podcast. You'll have a great conversation. Getting back to how it makes you feel, you'll feel good. You'll feel like you learned something. You'll feel like, you reached some listeners. You feel like you had somebody who invested in you. So please invest in us. And so those people aren't like that. And too bad, so sad,
Yeah, no, I think we talked about a lot of different ways someone can invest in themselves, but I think that's a really important point. If you invest in others, and that's like planting a seed. Of course, not every seed blooms, but if you do it enough times, you're going to have many opportunities in the future based on these people you invest in. And you don't do that transactionally. You don't do that in the hopes that they return the favor. You do that because you want to be generous and you want to help them. But ultimately, if you help good people, it's going to come around.
I think for me, a lot of it is, again, it's about how it makes you feel. And it's the same thing with any situation. And you have to it's kind of like James Fowles' Atlantic Magazine used to say, make what's important interesting. So we should make the right thing to be the stuff that feels good to do it. So Tony Robbins talked about it. He said, if you see a hamburger there, you have to train your mind to think it doesn't feel good to eat that hamburger. It feels good that you have the discipline to avoid that hamburger. It feels good, Eleanor Roosevelt said, the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. It feels good to feel wow, I have this bright, beautiful future, me being like you, thin in the waist, pretty in the face, and you have all this stuff there, but you have a future of so those people, it's their misfortune and their short-sightedness that they don't feel good by helping other people. They think it's, and that's...
And by the way, none of this stuff is hard. It doesn't, there's all this advice, if you want to move from the middle of the hierarchy to the alpha, you have to work 100 hours a week. You have to destroy yourself doing so. A lot of this is just about being aware of when you're being careless, which sometimes details just take seconds to correct. A lot of it is about being self-aware enough to not be delusional. Either delusional in the sense that thinking you could be positive delusional in the sense that you could think, oh, I'm the best, and so you get overly optimistic about your chances, or you could be negative delusional in that you get bitter. Oh, why are they getting more money than me? I'm better than them. It doesn't take any time to get better at your delusions. You just have to start being aware of them. A lot of it is about time management, which actually saves time instead of spends time. So don't go out to that. Don't regularly do something that's going to cost you hundreds of hours a year when you add it up. Take care of yourself, because sickness takes you out of the game for weeks at a time. So there's lots of little easy things, or even investing in someone else, like sending someone a thank you note, or a publicist coming here would have taken an hour, let's say in that case that you mentioned. So it's all these things are very small, but they add up, not in terms of time, but in terms of increasing your chances of success. But you have to be aware of these different
Yeah.
problems on the way to that climbing up that ladder.
And I think if you're fortunate, you have people around you who really are dream makers, not dream takers. They're people around you. Like, I think it's important. I think it is important. I have a friend who has a company and she has people around her. And if she makes a mistake, that person's like, well, look at you. You're not good at this. Or that, well, how did that person get good at this? Like, how do you help that person? And you have to want, and I really try and think about that in every single reaction I'm in. I told it to you 2 years ago when we started. Didn't I say, the opposite of love is use? I want you to be really successful. If you don't love that person, you're using them. You're using that person. And I don't want to be in those situations. You want to be where your values align. You want to be with people and you want that person to do really, really well. When I found that I've been in suboptimal conditions, I felt that person didn't want me to have that bright future that they want for themselves.
But I would say
that's not great. That's not ideal.
I would say that's ancillary also, though, to like, the inertia of always being around people who aren't thinking of the best for you, or when you succumb to bitterness, you're going to start hanging around with other bitter people.
Yeah.
So again, it's all I think there's like higher level things that are easy to correct with just being aware of the word and and thinking about it if it applies to you, and that solves. It seems to me when I interview a lot of people, that solves 90% of the problems they might have if they want to take that next step on the ladder. Being aware of, again, where are they delusional? Where, I see many entrepreneurs who smoke crack about their businesses. They hate every other business, but they think their business is the best when they're not really looking at it, or they're lazy.
And what do you do when
you
you see them? You go and you tell them, or you're just like, this guy's
you can't tell
out to
them.
lunch.
You can't tell them because they're not aware that that's a problem. It's like almost like a cognitive bias. Like they're not aware that.
But they feel. I'm sure they feel like, hey, I need to feel this way. I need to believe this. Same way that people feel like you wear a turtleneck, you're Steve Jobs.
You could say, look, there's no market for what you're doing, and they'll say they have always a response. Well, we'll create a market, and so or the market, doesn't know it's there yet. We'll educate them. So there's no real way to tell me. Self-awareness is really the important thing. There's a lot of people who are, again, just plagued by like what you're talking about, hanging out people who aren't thinking of the best for you. That's either out of your own inertia in terms of you don't feel like moving into a different situation, or your own delusions that maybe if you could change them when you can't. That's why I can't tell an entrepreneur your idea is bad. You can't really change people who are delusional. They have to change it. If you're around sick people all the time, either you're going to get sick, or you're going to get sick, and B, they're not going to succeed because they're sick all the time, and then they're going to get bitter and have doubts and be careless and vacillate between different things, and all these things are sort of macro. They're high level. There's specific strategies for being successful, but this is like higher level where you can if you eliminate these problems, then you could start talking about techniques like, okay, I'm going to be around people who are good for me. But those are just ancillary to these kind of higher level things to be aware about.
But getting back to Kobe Bryant and sports, Malcolm Gladwell did a very good podcast about revisionist history about the basketball player Rick Barry, who shot free throws underhanded. And even like the Columbia women's team didn't want to do it because it was granny style. So he was like one of the only two people. And he had like a quote about Rick Barry, who was just an unlikable person. And Rick Barry couldn't care less. Like he didn't care if the whole league hated him. And so the nail that sticks out gets hammered. Like you have to, like if you're in TV and you want to be the best producer around, some people are going to hate you. They want you to hang around them in the cafeteria. They want you to gossip about other people. And so you have to be willing. And so nobody really like Rick Barry couldn't care less if everybody thought he looked like a granny shooting underhanded. He didn't care if everybody hated his guts. He was a certain type of personality, and he just didn't have that, gene where he cared. So
I have to work on that. I have to work on that one.
And so you're going to get it. Like you're going to get it in any situation. And there's a degree of like anti-fragility where you just have to be like, okay, I'm going to get it anyway. I kind of liked in the debate, the other day where Pete Buttigieg said, okay, like here's what's going to happen in this debate. If we do this, this, and this, they're going to say we're socialist. And and if we do this, this, and this, guess what? They're going to say we're socialist too. So we have to do what we think is right. And so I think if those comedians who are happy being at a certain level, maybe they are. Maybe they're like the Daryl Dawkins who had a great family life and loved life. And we all have to decide what's our level of success is, how we define it.
But even then, I think always just being aware of these, whether you're happy at that level or not, being aware of what the opportunities are, being aware of when you're delusional, being aware of when you're careless, being aware of when you're not treating yourself well, so you're getting sick more. Just being aware of all these kind of potential obstacles, whether you want to move forward or not. I think awareness is of these things are
absolutely.
key. But anyway, Steve Cohen, once again, thank you
James.
for co-hosting today's podcast.
Thank you for having me. A real thrill.
We should do these every week. Why we
I would
stopped?
love to. Yeah.
You booked too many people for me, and we had to stop doing them.
Again, I would say, don't point the finger, point the thumb. It's you.
It's true. You always say, here's the typical
your
conversation.
eyes are bigger than your stomach.
Here's the typical conversation. I'll say, Steve, do not book anybody next week. And then you'll say, well, how about if we get Chris Rock on?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll be like, okay.
Well, you have to ask. Like you do. No, but you have to, like, that's why we're successful. We have to just keep doing the things like Stephen Covey, who, is he alive or not?
No, he died in 2012.
See, thank you. He lived a wonderful life and helped a lot of people, Stephen Covey. But I would say though that I just think like you have to sharpen the saw, Stephen Covey would say.
Yeah, I got to do that.
Yep.
You're fine, but I have to do it.
I'm perfect. You're terrible.
All right, thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Did you know that franchise owners are more likely to start a successful business than entrepreneurs who go it alone? Neighborly offers 19 premier brands with services that repair, maintain, and enhance homes. With Neighborly, you'll get the business model, marketing resources, and corporate support you need to pursue a rewarding future. Learn more about joining over 5,000 Neighborly franchises by downloading your free guide at go.nbly.com/podcast.